Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, November 12th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The UCLA game in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 17 days. Today, we're welcoming in Ross Fulton, our X's and O's guru, and when Ross is on the show, we're sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right, so we got some good, we got some bad to talk about with the Ohio State offense and their performance against Purdue. We'll start with the bad. We'll end with the bad, but we'll have a nice good bunch of fun stuff to talk about in the middle. Ross, we're going to start with the running game, and it feels like all season long we've talked about the fact that the running game has kind of been okay, but it's been inconsistent, and they haven't been able to really hit the big plays. And so much of those issues feel like they started up front. And this was another game where some of you saw the issues, and it felt like a lot of those issues, once again, started up front.
Yeah, so I saw a stat from Bill Conley, who does SP Plus for ESPN. I think Ohio State's like 19th in the country in rushing success rate, which is really good, but basically don't get anything above success rate, right? And so there's a host of factors to that. And before I get into like the upfront, the technique here, like big picture, right? So this is a RPO insert. However, again, first thing you'll notice is that Julian Sayin is hitting off here. Purdue safety flying downhill in cover 3. I feel like we do this every week, right? And there's two types of games for Ohio State's offense. There are games where they're pulling and throwing these, and those are usually very happy shows where, we talked about the number of yards and points scored. And then there are games like this where they're not throwing those and still very efficient. Like you look at Parker Fleming's, how bad did we get beat? Like Ohio State, massively success rate, like differential versus Purdue. But it gets a little clunky when they let teams like Purdue get away with outnumbering in the box against the run game, and they don't exploit that with the pass game, right? So I'm going to guess this is a game, like, again, very big picture. It's Purdue. You don't have Carnell Tate. You don't have Philip Daniels. We got lots of kind of bodies coming in and out. I hesitate the term mail it in might be too strong of a term, but this is definitely, I think, let's check the boxes. Let's work on running the football, even when we're outnumbered in the box, and let's get out of here, right? So all that being said, so you get a lot of this, particularly on rundowns, Purdue, a lot of single high, a lot of pretty aggressive, bringing guys off the edge, bringing safeties down. So if you're not throwing these RPOs, regardless of even if this is blocked up perfectly, Purdue is going to have an extra hat in the box, right? We've got 7 blockers for 8 defenders. Now, the game, it might have been more of like a 5-yard gain instead of that. But then we get into, as you said, like the blocking technique. This is, we can obviously focus on Tegra Shabola. Like this is pretty reflective of Tegra's issues. Like he's got the size and the when he locks onto someone, he's fine. But he waist bends, which means he reaches instead of moving his feet and, keeping his base under him. And the offensive line as a whole, I would say, then struggles with movement. So like we've shown this in recent weeks too, like lots of teams are stunting on them, and they're struggling sometimes with combo box. So coming off. So like Carson Hinsman does get off this block here to the linebackers. We saw a lot of situations on Saturday where they did not get to the second level. Here they do, but the problem is like they haven't secured the double team first, right? So you like on these zone concepts, you want to establish the double team, drive it vertically, and then come off the linebackers. That doesn't happen. Also, like Wilk has Merrick's path here to try to get to that backside linebacker. Like either he needs to come inside Austin Saraveld, or they need to double again, and then Saraveld needs to come off. So like you're just seeing these like it's not just a Tegra Shabola thing. Like obviously, like there's some pretty blatant examples where Tegra Shabola has struggled. That screen pass being one, some pass protection breakdowns where again he's reaching and getting guys right in Julian Sayin's face. I will say, like without Josh Padilla, there's only so much they can do, right? Like there's not really another option at right guard. So I think that like I don't think Tegra's probably going anywhere. I think if Josh Padilla gets healthy, you'll see like more of like a fulsome rotation going forward. But I will say it's like not just Tegra, and I'll share that here. I think Luke Montgomery's had quite a few struggles in recent weeks with like combo blocks, getting to the second level, and like there's just like a lot of issues with recognition when teams are moving around against them. Like, you're Ohio State, like teams are gonna like Purdue's are gonna throw the sink at you, right? And so you're gonna get some of that, but like I just think like instead of keeping their eye, like particularly on zone plays or like when guys are pulling, like instead of keeping your eyes up and like sticking with your steps or your assignment and like taking what comes, guys are getting too locked on, and so it's leading to like missed blocks or missed assignments.
Well, and if you like missed blocks, boy, is the next play for you. This is one where Isaiah West is running a stretch play, and he has just about the entire Purdue team right around him right away, and he still almost it does for a moment look like maybe he's going to break it, and then the turf monster gets him.
Yeah, again, so like 12 personnel, lots of 12 personnel in this game, and again, big picture, like especially with Carnell Tate out, you get why they got lots of tight ends. They don't. I mean, we saw pretty quickly like the wide receiver depth is actually pretty iffy. Like you have two amazing wide receivers. And then like, it starts to get a little dicey, right? Like I think Brandon Innes has been playing better. He had some nice plays, especially without Quincy Porter too, who I think has shown some promise. He had that nice run and catch against Wisconsin. Like, Mylan Grant dropped a pass right on that first third down that should have been on the first series that led to the only punt of the game. So like, I get why they're doing the personnel they are. It's just, you're just getting only so much out of the run game. So again, here, like Purdue's in a hot pressure. So again, we're going to be outnumbered and guys are moving. But even with that, like this is like a total breakdown, right? Like you have the right side of the offensive line. Here you have Ian Moore and Gabe Van Sickle, so both super young players. And like Purdue kept doing this where they like try to come off the backside against stretch because again, like don't have the quarterback run threat. You have bootlegs, but like you got to force them to respect the bootleg, which means you got to throw. And they're jumping around, so they're trying to peel back to pick these guys up. They miss. Then you've got this sort of, some people call it like a Montana pressure. Basically, you're trying to create the bear front, like we've talked about that, right? Like number 5 for Purdue, he's going to attack the center, so everyone's covered up. You basically get the impact of the penny front, and then 16, the backside linebacker can roam free, right? But like again, like eyes aren't up. You got to get Hensman over steps instead of like keeping on his track. Then you have Sierraville and Montgomery like turning their backs, so neither of them can come off for the backside linebacker. You've got then number 8 unblocked. And so you sort of get like, again, the comedy of errors where you're both outnumbered and not achieving blocks up front. So this was about as bad as it got. We're going to have some good examples here of the run game. Like they got it going in the second half. I just think it shows why the run game is more uneven compared to like, talking about the best passing game in the country that even, against Purdue, similar to like the Illinois game, like was asked to bail out Ohio State a lot of times behind the chains and like pretty consistently did so.
Well, let's get to some of the positives because rewatching the game, I was pretty impressed with how Bo Jackson ran. He had obviously the long touchdown right off the bat that got negated by the block in the back penalty on Jeremiah Smith. He also had some really tough runs and short yardage that, there was a 3rd and 3 that they converted. He had a 3rd and 1 that they converted. Tony Gardner and I talked about that on an episode of the Buckeye Weekly podcast that you can probably find right about now on our rewatch of that game. But Bo Jackson had some really solid runs, and this next one is just another example of that.
Yeah, this is the first game where I felt like the running backs really picked up the offensive line in spots. I mean, I think Brian Day after the game used the term like bring your own blocker for Bo Jackson, especially in some of those short yardage situations. Like CJ Donaldson had some tough runs. Like he scored when he was like hit at the 3 and like he's doing a much better job in those short yardage situations, getting his pads lower compared to like that OU game we talked about earlier in the season where a safety trucked him. Like he's carrying guys in the end zone. Bo Jackson, made some guys miss in the backfield, carried some guys for first down. So I agree with you. And I do think the run game, again, it got on track maybe a little bit more once they figure out what Purdue is doing. So this is like the exact same scheme as we just showed, where it was like a swinging gate fence with everyone in the backfield, right? But like here, it's executed well. So you're again 12 personnel. You're getting this front side. You kind of have this like combo lead block that we've talked about. And here you can see like on the left side, they execute this hinge correctly because, as I said, like Purdue, the first couple series of the game had guys just like screaming off the back edge that made blocks or made tackles unblocked. They started having to respect the bootleg. You get here, Carson Hinsman does a really nice job getting the second level. And like the final thing is like, again, unlike some of those early examples, here it's 1st and 10 and Purdue's in cover 2. So we got 2 deep safeties instead of an extra one in the box. And so like all those things came together. Purdue threw a lot of looks at them, as I said. So like the more, as not to be a broken record, but like the more they complete the RPOs and like lean into that stuff, passing on early downs that forces teams out of being aggressive against the run, like the better the run game is going to look.
Before we get to the next running play, I did want to ask you about something that Tony and I actually talked about on one of the shows earlier in the week. And that was, since you mentioned CJ Donaldson, on that Lincoln Keenholz touchdown, CJ Donaldson does a really nice job as the lead blocker on that one. And watching that, you kind of wonder, they've obviously used Nate Roberts a bunch as that lead blocker, and he's been okay. But when you've got CJ Donaldson, he's probably a little more dynamic with the football in his hands than Nate Roberts is, at least out of the backfield. Would that make sense to think about using CJ Donaldson in that kind of lead blocker role at times, especially in those sort of short yardage situations?
Yeah, I think it depends if they feel comfortable with like Bo Jackson being the tailback in those situations. I think that they like the fact that Nate Roberts offers probably like a pass catching threat out of the backfield theoretically in those situations, but so does Donaldson. So that could be a possibility. I mean, and you saw like on that Lincoln Keenholz run, that's what a +1 does, right? So now you have an extra blocker because the quarterback's the ball carrier. And so that might be something, I don't think it's going to be something that they're going to use regularly, but they put it out there on film again. And it's something they could go to if they really, needed a short yardage. But I agree that play was executed well. And I do think that Donaldson's serving a role. I mean, I continue to struggle, as I've said, like I said earlier, I get the 12 personnel. When we get down the tight end depth chart, I think that it leaves something to be desired. And I continue to struggle putting Purdue aside where they're trying to get guys reps in high leverage situations. Like, how much do they really want to be playing these like 4th and 5th tight ends? I think like seeing lots of missed blocks from that group as well. Not just the offensive line. So, it's an interesting theory. Again, I think it depends somewhat how they feel about the other tailbacks handling that role. Like clearly they feel the best about Jackson and Isaiah West as runners, but as Dave's happy to talk about, there's lots more to that role. I mean, Isaiah West missed on a blitz pickup and, nearly got Sayin killed right away. So like stuff like that's just going to limit it. So obviously, they feel more comfortable with Donaldson kind of like a short yardage 3rd down back, and then even like Peoples and out of the backfield in the passing game. So it seems like they're going to just keep having sort of niche roles for all 4 of those guys.
Yeah, it does feel like they're sort of piecing together the running backs rather than having 1 or 2 guys that they kind of trust to do a little bit of everything. But man, you mentioned the failed blitz pickup by West, and that was certainly something that would go on the negative column. But man, oh man, he had some nice runs. He continues to look really good in sort of these flashes. And you hear Ryan Day talk all the time about guys flashing, but you got to do it consistently. This was one of these flashes. This is GT counter. This is something we see them run a decent amount. But West turns this next one into a really nice game.
Yeah, it's funny because that blitz pickup was so passe, if you were, not aggressive and not violent. And when he runs, by contrast, like he gets going downhill, man, he's a load. So this is like, they've had so much trouble when they run counter in terms of like the guys that are pulling, the guards or the tight ends, recognizing like what's going on and who they need to pick up. By contrast, like when they run GT counter like this, it's been really smooth. Like they've had some good runs, but I think to me, like the bigger picture thing here is like they combine this notably with arrow or slide screen to Max Clare. Like, so this is 13 personnel, right? But they still have this like threat stretching the defense horizontally. And like whether you use this example or like on that Jeremiah Smith where he was, mugged and still caught the ball on his pass interference. Like that was a pin and pull RPO. Like they look good with sort of these concepts that are kind of going both laterally, both directions where you keep the pass threat. But yeah, this is blocked really well. Tag rope Tribola, pull, good kick out, good log by Ian Moore. Really nice job by Kazmarek coming down and then getting off on the linebacker. And, probably if West cuts to the left instead of the right, it might be a touchdown. But as I said, like, I just think the way for this run game, generally, like they have run stretch well from the pistol. But I still think that it's like when you really push comes to shove, like using concepts that combine the RPO threat, whether it's like horizontally stretching the field or like, more of the vertical ones like we just showed the glance route.
All right, and now we're gonna see Julian Sayin go very vertical on this one. This is this long touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith, and we have seen a whole year of Julian Sayin making great throws and Julian Sayin being very comfortable throwing the ball down the field, and to a degree that you would still be a little bit surprised with a first-year starter being this comfortable throwing the ball as far down the field as he is, regardless of who his wide receivers are. Still, this is one, even by those standards, this is one that, several photographers on the sideline, this next one, this is this long touchdown to Jeremiah Smith. This is one where we watched it and went, holy crap. And then you turned around and watched you looked at the video board, it was like, holy crap, this was an unbelievable throw.
Yeah, when you're talking about coming up, half rolling to your left, getting your shoulder squared and putting that in the location he does, it's a great throw. It's interesting, like, you'll note here that Jeremiah Smith's in the slot. I can't say Ohio State's the most full disclosure team about injuries, so you never know quite how and when they were exactly prepared to not have Carnell Tate. But whether this was more on the fly or more in the plan all week, saw Smith in the slot a lot against Purdue, trying to move him around because, as we'll see, like, trying to avoid teams doubling him especially without Tate there. And so, they use this little motion from Innis to pull him out, and they get this seam route against cover 2. So this is like a really similar concept to the one they used with Carnell Tate when he was in the slot a couple weeks ago for a touchdown. This linebacker is obviously never going to be able to run with Smith trying to, play that pull runner technique. And so, the other thing they do, like Day always does a great job of like protecting the O-line and pass protection. So like wherever you have certain breakdowns, you get a lot of these like 6 and 7 man protections as well, where you're, pulling the backside guard, then you're getting a full slide. So everyone just has to worry about the gap to their right instead of like having, like we talked about last week with that Carson Hinsman situation, like, half slide or big on big where you got multiple gaps. And, so you get these established protections where you can throw vertically. And obviously the more you can move around Smith. And, the other thing I'll note is like with Innis playing Tate's position, like another thing I would look for, particularly like when you get to the Michigans of the world who want to double Smith, but even Tate as well, as Purdue had in their game plan, like putting them to the same side of the field as well, because it makes doubling harder.
All right. And someone else who helped fill in and, fill in for Carnell Tate again on Saturday against Purdue was Bryson Rogers. You saw them kind of mixing in a bunch of different guys. This next one, this is, I believe, the long catch of the day for Bryson Rogers. I think this was a third down conversion as well. And just another example of no Carnell Tate, no problem. Just throw, there's Julian Sayin finding another open receiver over the middle.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I thought to start off, like, Bryson Rogers, like, took advantage of his opportunity. Obviously, as I said, Graham dropped that one, and it was a while before he came back in. I thought Bryson Rogers had himself a nice game, but like, it definitely makes it, when you say no problem, like it was harder.
No problem against Purdue, maybe, is a better way to explain it. Yeah.
So you could see early on third down, Purdue was basically running like 2 doubles. So similar to what Penn State did, it kind of looks like 2 deep man under, where they basically want to double 2 sides. Once they knew Carnell Tate wasn't playing, you got a lot of this on third down. This is 1 double, right? So you have Jeremiah Smith in the slot. You have a single deep safety. What the other safety is doing is he's just double covering Smith, right? So you can see the bracket. Like the nickel has outside leverage, that safety has inside leverage. So he's, for all intents and purposes, double teamed. And so that means, like, as Sayin talked about post game, like, he's got to go somewhere different with the ball. So you have to work to the opposite side, hits Rogers on this dig. You saw earlier in the game, like Innis, when they doubled Smith on that 3rd and 5, where Sayin actually kind of threw it a little bit behind Innis on that H out, and he made a nice catch and run. So you did see the slack picked up. From Ohio State perspective, would not want to have to try to continue this playoff run without Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. I mean, that's what makes the offense, along with Julian Sayin, special. Like, it's teams can really target Smith. And so you saw them have to kind of work harder again to like move Smith around, to generate concepts. But again, as I said, like, it's a pretty, the passing game is like off the charts efficiency wise compared to anyone else in college football. So like, it's not many teams that can get in like 2nd and 20 and like they hit, Sayin against cover 3, hit Smith on that deep comeback route, for a first down, right? Like, you get yourself behind the chains. It's really difficult. Again, opponent caveats apply, but like still, it gives them so many more opportunities to like bail themselves out with the passing game. And like, Max Clare, again, like they had some concepts that were going to hit him. And like the one he slipped on, Jake Butt talked about that during the podcast. It was sort of like a kind of a full like cross. And then that seam route, that the timing was just a little off between one of the few times. I almost wonder whether like that play action to Isaiah West on that one, if people can remember, where he sort of overthrew it over Claire's head. Like, West initially went to the right and then he came back to the left. Like, that may have thrown the timing off a little bit. Again, like sort of the issues of, young running backs. But all that said, like, there's other options there, and that's the good thing for them when they do have both Smith and Tate. But it's a pretty dynamic passing game. So I continue to believe, even when they're like putting all this stuff on tape of like running into these heavy fronts, playing a lot of tight ends, I continue to believe that's like sort of part of like the larger plan of like both load management, working on the run game, and then you want teams to come in ready to defend that, and then you hit them with the pass game against it.
All right, and we've got to do this. Sorry, Julian, we've got to do this one. We said earlier the "Oh wow, Julian Sayin throw" brackets complimentary. This is the "Oh wow, Julian Sayin throw" brackets derogatory. The interception he threw, Ryan Day basically said, yeah, he knows he knows what he did. Basically, what is he seeing here that he makes this throw?
Yeah, if we watch on the TV copy, you're like, there's nothing there. Here, once you see it with all 22, you can kind of see it. So Purdue, as I said, mixed sort of like hot pressures, aggressive like doubles with a lot of drop 8, which they do here, right? So you're only getting a 3-man rush. You're playing 3. It's a double 3 cloud. Jim Knowles uses some of this. So you like both corners in the flats, but you got 3 deep defenders. So it's 3 deep, 5 under. And Ohio State's running 4 verts, which is like low red zone. I think you're basically looking to hit the seam. Now, I will say Innis actually is open on the seam route, but Sayin, you can see he's clearly looking at Jeremiah Smith, but they like basically triple team Jeremiah Smith here. Like, they're dropping that defensive end on him, who carries with him. You got this 2 safeties right there. So that's not there, right? You could probably say like dump it to CJ Donaldson. There are a couple of times in this game that I thought, like, these are the trade-offs. Like everyone was on saying earlier in the year for like, you're dumping it off too much. There were probably a couple of times in this game he could have dumped it off, but you see him, as we talked about at the time, like he's going to want to start pushing it down the field more and more. As he goes into the scramble, and, unfortunately, as we were talking about Tegra Shabola having some issues in pass protection by leaning here, like despite the 3-man pressure, he gets beat inside, or at least enough to force Sayin off the spot. Again, that happened several times on Saturday, both to Shabola and to Luke Montgomery. So like Sayin scrambles. When he's scrambling, you can see Innis go into scramble drill, right? And he's coming to the right side here. He's open. Now, the problem is he's open, but he's going to run right into Jeremiah Smith, who's sort of stuck on that safety. And so I don't think Sayin's throwing to Smith. I think he's throwing to Innis, coming back across the formation. The thing is that by dropping 8, that defensive end is just sitting there. And obviously throwing back across your body, you can only get so much on it and so much height. particularly in the low red zone. So it's a mistake. He shouldn't have done it. Like, the choice here is probably like dump it to Donaldson, see how close he can get, or even, I'm not sure Sayin has much of a chance of scrambling. That linebacker sitting there, it's a dead play. Like, the bigger problems like on this situation, and then when they kicked the field goal, came on first and second down, like being, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, or 3rd and goal from the 7 or 8 yard line. It's just like, it's a low percentage situation. So definitely a mistake, but like, he's starting to take more chances than he did earlier in the year. And so that's sort of the downside of that.
All right, so there you go. There's the breakdown of the Ohio State offense against Purdue. We'll have Ross back on later in the week to talk about the Ohio State defense against Purdue. And when he's back, we will once again be sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.